What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here, back again to talk about another Overwatch term, Death Ball. This is something that is more utilized in the pro community. You'll probably hear it there if you watch pro games. But we're kind of looking at one, actually, as I demolish it. But this was asked to be covered by a viewer of ours named Ryan GP, who asked it on my last Overwatch Terms Explained video, so I'm covering it here for you all. A Death Ball in Overwatch essentially is a well-rounded team composition of a Reinhardt in front, protecting DPS characters, dealing damage to the other team, with a mix of healers behind there as well. Well, that's the answer. Video over, but there's more I could cover too. It originated in esports back in the StarCraft 2 days, I believe, and I think it still gets used in MOBA games like Dota now as well. But to just imply a large force that's well-rounded, right? And what you're watching on screen now is a good example of how to tilt the enemy team into desperation mode. They got the cart very close here, but since I was able to work around their death ball when they're playing as a team, for some reason, even though we're in ranked right now, they start to think that it's a good idea to keep going in one by one, and they kept trickling respawns. Here they're starting to engage more together, but really what they need to do is, even though it wasn't working, they have to group up, because if they don't, I can just fly around them as Pharah, pick whatever fights I want, and dictate the battle ultimately. Now, one of the biggest counters, and you'd know this if you have watched my counters and synergies guide, which will be completed shortly, Pharah is excellent against Reinhardt, and Reinhardt is the basis to every death ball because he can move his shield along with him. But Pharah has the ability to utilize the terrain and fly over the death ball and deal damage to any point of it. So it doesn't matter that his shield's set up here. If his healers get out of line, I can start pegging into the healers, and all of a sudden now they don't have any healing, and I split them up, and I pinpoint them, and I deal massive damage into them left and right, and they don't know what to do. That frustrates a team to the point where they think they just have to desperately attack onto the point with every single respawn, but in reality, it's the job of the hit scan characters to take me out. Or, if that's not working, you can completely drop the concept of the death ball and go all out with fighting me in the air. You could toss Winstons at me or toss Winston shields on top of the point so I can't shoot down onto it. Reinhardt ultimately is weak to Pharah is what I'm trying to get across if that hasn't got there already. But compare to how I play in my own death ball, because on the other side, when I was defending, the enemy team was able to be split up more often, and they may not have realized what the actual problem was, the problem being me. I feel like I say that far too often in these videos, but it is true. When you have a certain enemy player who is dealing far too much damage to your team and it feels like nobody's dealing with them, you need to reverse gears with your strategy and more heavy-handedly counter it, whether that means more hit scan or more mobility, whatever it takes. And instead of committing to this fight after 3 of my teammates die, I back up a little bit, but still occupy enough space to not allow the enemy team to simply push in and spawn trap us. And I get a few chip kills here and there, and ult would have been more successful if that bastardly turret wasn't set up in my blind spot. But the death ball is an important thing to understand in Overwatch because it is the most efficient way to battle in a team composition. Ultimately, I would say there are 3 methods of battles that occur in Overwatch. There is the standard death ball versus death ball, which you see in the NA and EU Pro meta, where it's a lot of chip damage back and forth, and everybody's behind the Reinhardt shield, and they're just trying to take advantage of when the Reinhardt shield gets popped first, and when that happens, they move in quick and swarm around it and overcome the other team. There is skirmishes, where characters like Genji or Diva. And by the way, this is a tip, watching myself back. This is the second time this Reaper has flown in onto my enemy on my own team, and luckily he hasn't been able to have much success, but I had my concussion blast both times, and looking back at this footage, I get a little mad at myself that I'm trying to kill it when I could just blast his ultimate away and save my team. But skirmishes are when the fights are spread out. Now, typically, that's not that useful in Overwatch, because there's so many inherent synergies with playing with the team, because the Reinhardt shield value only has value if your teammates are shooting through it. If the rest of your team is all spread out across the map, Reinhardt just doesn't have much use, doesn't have anything to do. He's bored, he's just shielding himself, and that doesn't work. Instead, you may want to go with like Winston and Rosaria for your tanks if your team is faster, where you have like a Tracer and a Genji who are flying into the opposing team's face and skirmishing. That's actually the way the Koreans play this game. Did you know that South Korea has a pro meta as well? And it plays completely differently from what I've noticed so far. Maybe it has changed since last I've checked in, but it's very heavy in Winston and Genji jumping around and skirmishing, as opposed to the NA and EU side, which has more death ball focus. Now, the third style of fight that I would say is chaos, aka just a big team fight, because once 2 death balls or the skirmishes happen, it kind of just descends into madness, and it's difficult to even describe it as being something that is structured in that way. But this is a cheeky little bit of overtime gameplay. As you saw, I took out the Bastion, and we actually sustained heavy losses in that first fight, but because we have an attacker's advantage and our respawn is slightly closer, we were able to jump back in. Winston has a huge leap, so I'm able to get to the battle much quicker, and ultimately we just overwhelmed the point.
The coin has spoken! Blessed be this day!
And I thought it was so funny, that guy making fun of the overtime rule set. So if this cleared things up for you, please drop a like on the video. If you have any more questions, please leave it in the comment section below. That's been it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.